Game over, man. Game over.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. Why so serious?
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Well, welcome to this podcast review for April 29th, 2025, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us for this conversation, everybody, where Brendan takes us to school. Class is in session as he teaches us about accounting, because he is the math wizard of the two of us.
I don't know if that's actually true.
Oh, that's
I may
100% true.
I may work a little bit in finance and numbers for my job, but I'll tell you what, I can't do accounting to save my life.
No. Accounting, I did take a couple of classes in college, as I'm sure most of us did. The worst thing about taking accounting in college is that, at least for me, they had that class at 8 o'clock in the morning. You are not going to learn anything at 8 o'clock in the morning in college, let alone accounting.
I was just going to say,
who
let
made
alone
that
accounting.
decision?
Well, let alone accounting, which is basically its own language.
Yes.
Whether it be managerial accounting or whatever it is. Trying to dissect the difference between income statements and balance sheets is hard enough. To do that at 8 in the morning is going to be tough.
Yeah, no way. There was no way you were going to learn about accounting at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm fairly certain I slept through all of those classes. And I don't mean I wasn't there. I was present. I slept through all of those classes.
Although I think if those classes were maybe taught by Christian Wolf, I might be more interested.
Maybe. Yeah. You get someone that looks like Ben Affleck in there and
yeah,
can teach you some accounting. Yeah, maybe that would go a long way. I don't know.
For sure.
At any rate, we are here to talk about The Accountant 2. This is, of course, the sequel to the 2016, 15?
2016. This is almost a decade
film, The
of
Accountant.
time
Yeah, it's been a while.
between-
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
But we live in a world where sequels dominate the day. So here we are. Gavin O'Connor, Ben Affleck, John Bernthal, they are back. And even J.K. Simmons has a brief reappearance in this film.
Very brief.
I guess to reiterate, I know it's going to be a little bit of my opening thoughts. It's hard to open your thoughts on The Accountant 2 without comparing this to the first film, but
Yeah.
I guess briefly, Brendan, yay or nay on The Accountant 1?
Yay. Pretty big yay, actually. I think that movie kind of rocks. And I gave it a revisit in preparation for The Accountant too. And I liked it more on a rewatch. I have to give Gavin O'Connor and his screenwriter here, Bill Boudica. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. But the way that they basically take what is essentially the template for a conspiracy thriller, and then they go full on warrior with it in the final act is pretty awesome. It's a very weird movie, that first Accountant, which makes it weirdly fun and kind of quirky. Like it's a very funny movie, but it's also very quirky. And I think that's one of its best qualities.
It is a bit quirky. I think what I really like about The Accountant 2, or the first Accountant, excuse me, is that it does have those warrior vibes, not even just the third act, although I very much do agree with that.
Yeah.
But that whole film in a lot of ways is about brotherhood and standing up for each other, because there are a lot of flashbacks, more so than I even remembered.
Yeah, it's kind of like its own short film within this movie.
Yeah, like there's a lot to that film that is really about character. Like that's an action film, or a so-called marketed action film that is not at all afraid to slow down and let character breathe.
It's kind of bold. It's kind of bold.
Yeah. And that reminded me a lot of Warrior, because Warrior, again, it's this sports movie, but not. Like, that is a family drama that just happens to also be about MMA. So that's somewhat how I feel about The Accountant.
Gavin O'Connor is very good at taking and utilizing genre as a way to explore something different. And I think his best movies do that. I think Warrior and The Accountant are probably my two favorite films of his, with maybe Miracle in third place there. I think those are his three films that are maybe the most successful at doing that thing.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Like The Accountant, love Warrior especially.
Sure.
And I do like Miracle. I don't think I like it quite as much as those two.
Oh no,
I do
it's
really
not
like it.
quite as good. I haven't seen Tumbleweeds, his
I
debut
haven't seen
film,
Tumbleweeds either.
which
No.
I know a lot of our colleagues in the film critic sphere hold that one pretty highly. So it is probably one I need to revisit, or not revisit, but watch for the first time.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one either, but yeah, I mean, Gavin O'Connor he's really good. When he taps into his strengths, he is a
He's
good
reliable.
solid filmmaker.
He's
Yeah,
reliable.
very
Yeah.
reliable for sure. All right. With all of that laid out, let's jump into The Accountant 2. As we noted, directed by Gavin O'Connor, it stars Ben Affleck, John Bernthal, Cynthia Addai Robinson, who was also in the first film as well,
Mm-hmm.
J.K. Simmons in a small reprisal, and Daniela Pineda as well here. If you're not familiar with The Accountant 2, Christian Wolf, he's back, and he applies his brilliant mind and illegal methods to reconstruct the unsolved puzzle of a treasure chief's murder. I do love how they put that into the synopsis. And look, I'm just going to give it away.
Okay.
They throw a treasury chief's murder as if that's not J.K. Simmons. That's J.K. Simmons they're talking about.
And he's barely in the marketing. He's barely even in anyone's acknowledgement that he's in this movie. So when he shows up in the beginning, your first thought is, oh, he's probably going to die in a few minutes. And that's exactly what happens.
Yeah. I mean, it is very early on. That's not a spoiler. I mean, maybe it is a little bit, but it's literally in the first 5 minutes.
It's the opening scene. It's before the title card
opening
drops.
Scene. Yeah, exactly. It is the setup of the movie.
Find
he does play,
the accountant.
somewhat of a pivotal role, though, in terms of setting up the trajectory of the film narratively.
I mean, in a way, he's very much all over the film's initial poster, which had that tagline, "Find the accountant." That is basically in relation to J.K.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, with that laid out, Brennan, what did you think about The Accountant 2?
I was looking forward to this one, man. I really was. And it mostly came down to our appreciation for that first film. I think that's a really underrated and very interesting thriller. And when The Accountant 2 premiered earlier this year, I think it was at South by Southwest, if I'm not mistaken, the word of mouth, especially from some of our fellow critics, was that it was surprisingly really good. A lot of them saying it's even better than its predecessor. And I don't agree with that at all. Sadly, I really don't. I'm overall mixed on the movie, even though I'm more disappointed than anything else. I feel like I want to be harder on it, just given how it functions as a sequel to The Accountant, but I can't deny that as an action thriller in its own right, it's not bad. It's pretty good for what it is. I think it's pretty effective as an action film. I think Gavin O'Connor has a good handle on that stuff still. I think it's sometimes very thrilling. I think the plotting is intricate in a way that is enough to keep you engaged. And I do think that John Bernthal and Ben Affleck have good banter. I think the chemistry is fun. It just feels very disconnected from its predecessor to me. And I don't mean that as an overall bad thing, because I tend to like sequels when they deviate from their predecessors and they try to do their own thing. But this to me feels more like something that started out as just any random brotherly led conspiracy thriller that then got morphed into an accountant sequel. It almost feels like the accountant isms here were an afterthought to course correct this into that type of sequel. Because there are so many things here that just feel so disconnected. Even Ben Affleck and John Bernthal, I feel like, are giving performances that, to me, it almost feels like they're playing different characters at times. I don't really feel that much synergy there between that prior film and this one. I do realize a lot of time has passed, and I also want to say that carefully, especially given Christian Wolf as a character in his condition here. I don't really know a lot about how that works, so maybe there is some authenticity there that I cannot speak to. But there's just something about this experience that as a sequel to The Accountant, it doesn't feel like a continuation or a natural continuation. It feels like something that was morphed as an afterthought. And that kind of bugged me. It actually feels kind of safer by comparison, because it just feels like it feels more just like a basic conspiracy thriller, when that first film had a lot more interesting layers to it, as we already talked about. And I found those things more stimulating and more unique. And I didn't really feel that with this one. So I was sadly disappointed with it.
I had fun with it. I did enjoy it. I don't think it's nearly as good as the first film. In fact, I don't think it's particularly close. Although I seem to be in a minority on that, so take it for what it's worth, I guess.
I guess we both are, yeah.
Yeah. But I do think that First Accountant, for all of its blemishes, it is a deeply poignant film. It does play into stereotype. There's no doubt about that. But I think beyond its cliches, that film is aiming to celebrate autism. It is genuinely sincere in that. It's not exploiting autism to make a character crazy or over the top or anything like that. It's exploiting it in an affable way that is meant to be celebratory. It is a film that wants to celebrate autism. And look, given where we are in 2025, that idea, a little endearing given certain political figures at the moment.
Sure.
Even if it is a little flawed in execution in that film. I can still see why people would be upset about the way it's depicted in that film, but I think it is doing it cheerfully.
The intent has a lot of sincerity.
I agree. The Accountant 2, I do think it still has that spirit, although this is very, very different in terms of its overall approach. This is much more comedic in nature. It is a road movie, a road brother movie in this case, and a lot of it is reliant on the dynamic between Affleck and Bernthal, as you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I do really like it. My issue with the film is that the humor, at least for me, and humor is obviously very subjective, I do think it is quite hit or miss here. I don't know if it's the performances. I don't think it's the performances as much as it is the writing of the dialogue or the setup of the gags. Whatever it may be, it doesn't always land. For example, there's that scene early on with Braxton, the Bernthal character, having a complete mental breakdown over having a call with his ex to negotiate the rights for their dog. That did not work for me.
It goes on for so long.
It goes on for so long.
There's no payoff.
I thought it was extremely cringe. It does not work in execution. Bernthal is a great actor. I think he can deliver great humor. That gag was not properly thought out. It feels extremely out of place, futile, adds nothing to this film. And this is a little over 2 hours. That's a scene that could easily have been cut out of this film and doesn't really do anything for this movie other than it establishes that Braxton is looking for some sort of companion.
Well, even so, like there's a conversation he has with Christian that establishes that later on. So you really don't need that scene. You're kind of right.
That's true. Because there is the scene, and I believe it's somewhat in the trailer, or at least there's stills floating around when they're
on top of the RV.
Yeah. And that dialogue is really great because it's mostly like it's emotionally grounded.
Maybe the best scene in the movie.
Talking about their loneliness. Yeah. It's fantastic. And Braxton is talking about how he doesn't have anything to come home to. And there's a freedom in that. But on the other hand, Christian is maybe looking for that companionship in some sort of way. It's a great exchange. I do like that a lot. And maybe that is enough for this film. I do agree ultimately with you. That moment in the hotel with Braxton, the mental breakdown, it's mostly cringe. It just
Yeah.
does not work. I think when the film plays into Gavin O'Connor's strengths as a filmmaker who is solid with action, he's good with mystery, he's great with drama and character dynamic in that under that specific prism, that's when the film is at its best. That's when it is diverting. And I think that's why I like the action in the third act, because it's playing
pretty
into the strengths of these
it's pretty effective.
of these two actors and O'Connor as a filmmaker. Broadly speaking, though, and I do agree with you, and ultimately why I don't think the fact that this has better reviews than the first film, maybe that is indicative of this larger criticism of film criticism in 2025 and how easy it's become. I don't know. And look, I'm not the harshest critic in the world either. I don't see a lot of bad movies purposely because I don't have the time. I admittedly am not the harshest critic. Maybe there is some credence to that. I don't know. This film is so much safer. It is so much broader than that first film. It has zero ambition comparatively. I did have fun with this film. I did have fun with it. But that's all it is. That's all it is. That first accountant is at least going for something. And that means something to me.
It means something to me too. And I think that's maybe why we differ on this one when compared to the majority of critics out there. And not to say that they're wrong, but there are a lot of critics out there that just simply respond more to narrative smoothness and than anything else. And I will admit, even though I love that first accountant way more than this one because of its ambition, it is also a sloppier movie. That's kind of the trade-off in some ways. At least by comparison to this. I do think The Accountant 2, just as a piece of entertainment, I think is more smoothly told. So maybe by comparison, it's a cleaner movie. I'm just not as interested in that kind of cleanliness for a movie like this. I want to be challenged. And I think that first film is the more challenging one for sure.
Yeah, by far.
Absolutely. And I think you're onto something as to why I felt like in the moment that this almost felt more like just any other conspiracy thriller that then got morphed into an accountant sequel. And that's because the comedic timing here is just kind of wonky. If there is maybe a lack of smoothness that I talked about earlier, it maybe does come in the way that the comedy is handled. And I again, I don't know if it's the editing or the performances or the writing or just the fact that it's not fully playing into Gavin O'Connor's strengths, but there is sometimes an awkwardness to that. The scene where it does work is the top of the RV sequence, like we already talked about. And I think it's a moment where the camera just kind of lingers on two actors giving solid performances. It doesn't have to worry about filmmaking trickery to make it something that's more accessible and palatable for the general public. And then there's another scene later on, which, again, kind of a throwaway bit, but I think the chemistry between Bernthal and Affleck is really good in that cowboy bar scene.
That was the other one I was going to bring up.
Yeah, I kind of liked it. It's futile. It means almost nothing in the grand scheme of the movie, but I think it's those are the two moments where I felt like, okay, Affleck and Bernthal are now playing the same characters again. And for the most part, I didn't quite feel that. And maybe it's because they're too governed by the plotting and the simplicity of what this is going for underneath all of those things.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's where the writing does undermine these characters, or I do think it could be the setup of the gag. I don't think is always appropriate given who these characters are, as we noted with the hotel scene. But when it does work, I do think it's really good. The RV scene is great, and not just because of the grounded emotion in terms of the discussion they're having, but even as that scene unfolds, there's still playful moments between them where they're ribbing each other as brothers would, or Braxton takes the suntan lotion and throws it away as a brother would. That's all simple. Like, that's where the simplicity of the film, I think, works, and the performers, Affleck and Bernthal, do a great job there. The cowboy bar sequence is another great one because, again, it's not overplaying its hand, and it plays into the strengths of the actors and who these characters are.
Yeah.
because it is established that Christian is looking for some sort of companionship. So that element of it, I think, is effective, and it sets up a moment for Braxton to be Braxton, who we know Braxton to be in these movies. So that gag at the end with him is great. Like all of that, like it's set up perfectly to work with the strengths of those actors. So like that's where the comedic backbone, I think, is at its best. When it tries to dance, pun intended, maybe outside of that, it just, man, I think it misses pretty hard at times.
It kind of falls on its face, I think. There are so many other moving pieces that really did not work for me at all. I really liked Cynthia Addai Robinson in that first film, and her being here is really that very literal tie to that old world of the previous film, but her character really doesn't add much to this at all. If anything, she kind of becomes just a MacGuffin, and it's really unfortunate because given how that plays out. And then
it's too straight. Like all she does, she has her convictions. She, is going to stick to I'm sticking to the law. And the only time the character goes outside of that is this silly gag regarding her office chair. And again, I just don't think that works here comedically.
That was not enough. And then you get a lot of backstory involving this criminal organization and this sex trafficking thing that's going on. And it mostly involves the Anai character played by Daniela Pineda. And I don't want to get too much into her backstory, but it's the one moment in the film where I kind of at least started to appreciate maybe this level of ridiculousness that it was kind of tapping into. All I'll say is this. The reveal of her is, I can only describe it as something out of the Terminator. It almost feels like a Terminator plotline in a way. And I admire that on its face. I don't think it's particularly interesting in the movie, though, but I at least admire the attempt at getting a little wonky with some of these things.
Yeah.
Which is maybe what I could have used a little bit more of, which is why I don't necessarily dislike the fact that this is a funnier movie when compared to its predecessor. I kind of like that idea, especially given how that first film was a very, sincere depiction of autism. This is a movie that maybe tries to maintain that sincerity, but do it in a bit more of a lighthearted way, as if to suggest that movies about mental illness don't always need to be so self-serious. And I kind of like that idea. I just wish that element was just more refined and more in keeping with that first film. And that's where it feels more generic by comparison.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. Where I do love how this film maintains the same spirit as the first one is that we go back to that home and we see that the assistant to Christian, does the character even have a name? I don't even know.
Justine, I believe
Justine?
it is.
Is that the character's name?
Yeah.
I was trying to recall it.
Or, I mean, that's what she's credited as here.
Okay.
And there's technically two actresses playing her, because you have the person of Justine is credited here, played by Allison Robertson, and then you have the voice, the British voice, played by Alison Wright.
Okay, yeah. So you have the Justine, who is, we knew, given the reveals of the first film, we knew that she was going to play a role here, and she does play a role, maybe even a bigger one, because we do go back to that home a few times, and we see that her operation has expanded and there's more people involved. And it just, again, it goes on to demonstrate the prowess of these individuals. They're not at all hampered in any sort of way given their condition, which again, in 2025, I do think there's but there is a power to that given the political discourse, I'll say vaguely.
Yeah.
But on its own terms in a vacuum, I do like the expansion of that. Could the film have done more there? Perhaps. Sure. Yeah. But again, I think the film is treating that sincerely, doing it affably.
It's not talking down to it. I agree with you.
Not talking down to it at all. And I kind of love that it doesn't over explain it either. Like it's just something that exists in this world.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a vagueness to it, but I don't know. There is a little bit of a charm to that. I just wish that the film was a little bit more ambitious on the whole. It just plays it very safe.
Yeah.
Other than the only, I guess maybe the one element of ambition is the Panetta character, as you're talking about. I don't know if I had Terminator vibes. It is a bit outlandish, though. I will absolutely give you that. I don't know if the film needed to have that kind of a reveal, but in a way, I do love how it attempts to transform a normal person into something that is not normal, but also maybe that is where the film is doing too much.
Well, it's kind of a weird thing, right? I feel like it's the moment where the film is doing too much, but the film is also simultaneously not doing enough. And maybe it just feels like it's doing too much because everything else around it is not doing enough. So it makes it feel that much more jarring. But it is it's the one moment where I feel like the film at least had some type of conviction and, tried to bring some personality to this for at least a moment.
Yeah, I also think there's, I don't want to say futile, but there is a bit of a disconnect between that character and the plotting of the film, because it's established early on that Anai has a direct connection to other characters that Christian and Braxton are ultimately after.
Yeah.
And while Anai isn't going, like, given the reveal that we see of the character, she may not always, she doesn't necessarily remember certain events as a result of something that happened. I'll say vaguely.
Right.
But then there comes a moment later on in the film where Christian does bring clarity as to her connection to this little kid that they're after. But then the film doesn't follow through on that at all. Like when we get to the end of the film, she's completely disconnected from what Christian and Braxton are after, which what they're after is very closely tied to Anai. So what are we doing there?
This feels like sequel setup. That's what this feels like. I kind of feel like things are left dangling because by the off chance the movie does well enough, Gavin O'Connor will come back to do The Accountant Cubed or Accountant 3, however they want to stylize this. Because yes, this is called The Accountant 2, but it's really called The Accountant Squared. How all the marketing wants to dictate that number 2. So I guess there's 2 accountants. So I guess we'll get a third one. Maybe Anai will be the third one.
Yeah. I guess I just don't understand the purpose of the character, how it's written, unless it's just sequel setup. And I guess if that's the case, that does bring clarity to purpose, but I also find that banal. Like,
I don't find that interesting either. It makes me able to explain how it's handled here, but I don't necessarily like that because that just makes the film feel more conventional once again. So many movies are doing that same level of sequel dangling for us. And that just makes this movie feel more in line with so many movies we get nowadays that are trying to build franchises, when that first Accountant felt like a kind of like a breath of fresh air. Like it gets better now just in the context of how movies are made nowadays.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, there's a lot to this film that is very messy. But look, I didn't walk into this film expecting all that much. I did not expect it to, like, I was hoping that this at the very least would reach the levels of the first film, but ultimately I didn't have the highest of hopes for this. I did ultimately get what I was expecting, and that's why I was able to have some fun with it. Okay. I did have fun with it in the moment, but I do think it is fleeting and it doesn't really foster much in terms of conversation. Obviously, we're doing our best here, but let's be honest, there's really nothing to this film to talk about.
But that's unfortunate because that first film does foster conversation.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly.
I could write a piece on that one and feel like I'm actually feeling stimulated. Like, that's a challenging movie. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, ultimately, it's a good fleeting movie, but that's all that it is. There is nothing more than that. And ultimately, that's why I don't think it's nearly as good as the first film. And like for me, it's not even close.
I'm with you. There's a big gap for me as well.
Yeah. I will say though, that final action sequence I did find compelling. It is a cheat code. It is 100% a cheat code, but anytime you involve children and stakes like that, you're going to get me invested. I can't help myself. Cannot help myself.
It's well choreographed. Like it's an effective action scene in its own right.
Yeah. But and the thing I like about both of these movies, the first film did this, and The Accountant 2 continues the same trend in terms of having a pragmatism to the action. There's not a lot of wasted time. The gunfights, you shoot, guy goes down. You shoot, guy there's not a lot of, like that old school 90s action. You shoot a guy in the chest and then he wakes up like 2 seconds later, behind you, and you got to kill him a second time. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's none of that in these movies.
No, this one's more immediate.
Yeah.
But yeah, I will give this film at least some credit in its attempt to sidestep expectations at one point, and it does really come down to the Anai character, as we talked about. There's a bit of a reveal involving her character, which we won't give away, but I didn't see it coming. It did surprise me, and I think the movie needed some level of surprise, especially given how that first accountant ended.
Are you talking about the fight in the house?
Yeah, kind of, because it's alluded to early on who she is and who she originally was, I'll simply say, which was kind of a surprise already. It's mostly in the archival surveillance footage at the hospital that kind of reveals some things about her. That's a bit, okay, that's actually kind of that's kind of interesting. There is a very literal tie to this case now, and who she maybe originally was, right? Which I thought was surprising. That first accountant had that huge surprise at the end that I did not see coming. So the movie at least tries to manufacture something to keep you on your toes, I'll simply say. And I at least respect that effort.
Yeah. I mean, I can see where you're coming from in terms of them maintaining the formula. The surprise in the first film makes sense to me because that whole film was about brotherhood and standing up for each other, fighting for each other. And so the reveal makes sense of the action there.
It makes sense for sure. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah. Again, but you get that surprise and it leads to nothing.
It's more disconnected. I don't disagree. I'm more just talking about the overall intent of trying to put some type of sidestep of expectations there. But I do think the choreography of how you get to that surprise in the first film is certainly better handled and makes more sense. Even if in that first film, I still found it kind of surprising. And I think that's the trickery of that first one, how well it's written, is that you have something that obvious in plain sight, and somehow the movie has these little tricks up its sleeve to make you not notice where it's actually going. Yeah. And I think that's really clever.
Yeah. I think where I have a problem with it in execution is that, and where I think I'm disappointed is that it feels as if the film is aware of its disconnect and is trying to remedy that disconnect only to then abandon it in the final act. And what I mean specifically is that, okay, we get the reveal of Anai, as you're talking about, in the hospital. Yeah. And it turns her, literally transforms her into a completely new person.
Right.
And at one point she finds herself in this house. She has a fight. She stabs a character. And then she goes to the wall and she gets the photo, the pivotal key photo that is the emotional nucleus of this film, right? So she takes the photo, which suggests that she recognizes who's in that photo. So she takes it. And then moments later, and I alluded to this earlier, she has a very brief exchange with Christian where Christian very, very clearly states who's in that picture.
Yeah.
So she recognizes it, and then Christian reaffirms who's in that picture, and then the rest of the movie she disappears. Like she's not involved.
Again, like I said,
at
it's
all.
sequel setup. It's sequel setup.
So it's like, why even? So it's like the film is aware, like, okay, she had an old life, she has a new life. Maybe she's going to Jason Bourne this and bring clarity to, or like
worse.
bridge those two worlds.
An accountant spinoff is basically what we're going to get.
But in relation to this film, it feels as if the film
forgot about it.
Is trying to bridge the old life to the new life with that photo and her grabbing that photo. But then it just doesn't follow through on it because she's not in the final action sequence at all. So it feels vacuous to me, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
It does. I don't disagree with that. Like I said, it feels like the movie forgot about it midway through. If anything, I'm appreciating the attempt at some type of rug to pull from under our feet, which the first film kind of had, but there was at least more conviction and thoughtfulness in how it was handled in that film. Because like you said, it made sense. Yeah. Here, it's leading to something that it doesn't deliver on, but at least the rug was there. They at least gave some thought on the rug. I guess it's a rug that, at least in the first account, the rug tied the room together. Here, it doesn't quite do that.
Fair enough. Okay, I don't know if I have anything else to add here.
I don't either. Mixed movie.
I'm positive mixed. Like I don't love it. I had fun in the moment. That was about it. I enjoyed it in the moment. That's all I really have to say.
Yeah.
I will say though, I did like Affleck once again here. I like Bernthal. I do think they have a great dynamic, and ultimately, I think the diverting qualities that do work here primarily come down to their dynamic together.
What did you think of the opening speed dating scene involving Ben Affleck?
It is awkward, but it seems very purposefully awkward. I guess it's trying to establish that he is looking for some sort of companionship, and that's a through line throughout the film. That eventually turns less toward a romantic partner outside of, I guess, the scene in the bar, as we talked about earlier, and really more so toward his brother. Which I do appreciate. It's an awkward setup, though. It is an awkward setup.
I think that whole scene is emblematic as to maybe why we're having issues with the movie in execution and how it's treating its comedy, because I think the intent of that scene is very affable, and I actually like that. But the editing is just so weird to me.
It's strange.
I think it would have benefited from a bit more smoothness, because it's also interspliced with Christian's explanation as to how he sort of manipulated the formula to make himself look better in these dating profiles, but then
which was unnecessary.
Well, I didn't mind that, but I think that should have been the conclusion of that scene to tie it off in a bit of a joke. But it's interspliced within each girl that he actually meets with. It's like it's actually a pretty badly edited sequence, and I think that's that's why I brought it up here.
Yep, I don't disagree at all. All right, that's all I got on the accountant 2.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm done counting.
That's it. If you agree or disagree, and look, a lot of you might disagree. People seem to enjoy this.
Yeah.
At least more than we did. So let us know. You can leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Reach out to us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can always email us in sessionfilm@gmail.com. All right, we have a review of David Cronenberg's The Shrouds. That was really fun. Please go and give that one a listen. Had a great time talking about that film. Episode 634, we do a summer movie preview. We concluded our Best Picture movie series for the 1960s as we talked about Midnight Cowboy. That was a really great discussion as well. We hope you enjoy it at the very least anyway. And then this weekend, we start the summer season as we get into Thunderbolts.
It's a heck of a way to start the summer with a movie called Thunderbolts.
Yeah, Thunderbolts.
And
the whole review we have to talk in that that brazen bad Russian accent the whole time.
The podcast will be the little toy. I can't even do a Russian accent. I'm going to sound so offensive.
I
I'm gonna
can't
just
either.
Stop here.
It's gonna be bad. Yeah, I couldn't do it at all. No, I am really looking forward to talking about Thunderbolts, though. I'm curious where Brendan where he lands on that film.
You keep talking about that. We keep talking offline that you're very intrigued to hear my thoughts on it, which is making me more excited for the film.
I am. I'm just gonna leave it there. I'm just curious where you land on it. We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but we'll have some thunderbolting to talk about this weekend as the summer is here. It's crazy that the summer is here already. It's wild.
Yeah. Weird.
Love, and the other thing too. We'll end here.
Okay.
Last May, if we all remember, last May, we thought it was the beginning of the end. It was one of the worst months that the box office has ever seen, at least for summer fair. And we thought the world was going to end.
We thought we thought movies were done.
We thought movies were done.
Well,
it's a year later. Movies are not done. Sinners has revived the box office.
And I'm glad it's a movie like Sinners, man.
I know. It's just very exciting. So, I just bring that up to say I'm curious where May goes this year comparatively to last year.
Yeah. And I will say this as someone that hasn't seen a Minecraft movie and doesn't really plan on seeing it anytime soon. I'm kind of glad it exists. I'm glad it did some things.
Yeah. Well, it keeps the theaters open, but at what cost?
Well, there's
Because
another
we're gonna get
conversation
16
to have.
more Minecraft movies.
Well, I mean, also at what cost as far as, disrupting the theater going experience, making the lives of theater workers miserable,
too.
bringing live chickens to the screening. I don't condone that, but it has the numbers, and I'm glad it's at least helping the movie business and getting some excitement. So it's a double-edged sword, I guess.
It is always a double-edged sword.
It always
keeps
is.
the theaters open. It keeps the lights on,
and it makes everybody miserable.
Hollywood's going to take the wrong lessons, and God knows what'll happen. At any rate, that'll be another conversation for another time. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast. I wouldn't mind seeing a count through, though. I would see
I
another
wouldn't mind
one.
either. Yeah. Sneak that out a little bit.